Good afternoon and welcome to the Veterans Forum. As you know, we are coming to you from the studios of Pittsfield Public Television, or Community Television, here on Frederico Drive in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. For the record, today is the 11th of January, 2008. This program, as you know, is part of the Veterans History Project conducted by the Library of Congress and supported by stations such as this throughout the country, inviting and hopefully helping veterans, male and female, share some of their memories, some of their stories as to what they did back in those days. World War II, Vietnam, Korea, you name it, to help fill the history of what has happened in the country. Today, I am very honored, if you will, to introduce and invite Rudy Sacco to be our guest and to share some of his memories. For the record, sir, would you tell us your name? Spell your last name.
All right, S-A-C-C-O, Sacco, and Rudolph is the first name. I was born in Pittsfield, lived in Pittsfield all my life, and was brought up on Turner Avenue. And I must say that that was low income for everybody. And I was brought up during a period of time that Bracco says is the greatest generation between the Depression and the war. And we had known what it was to go with patches on our behind and do without. And that was my background. I was one of 5 children, the youngest. And I was the first to go into the service, actually, because my 2 brothers they didn't pass the physical. And so it was a big decision because I loved my high school days. I just found them to be so important socially. And they weren't all, because I worked at Berkshire Life Insurance Company. I had to get working papers at the age of 14 and delivered the mail in the morning, got up very early, delivered the mail in the morning, did the same thing in the afternoon. I was an entrepreneur before that because I made leather pocketbooks and things in the garage, and I sold groceries from my horse and buggy. I had a pony named Muggins, and I went around doing this. I planted my own garden, and it was an era of survival. And I cut up cardboard for my father these were war years and the salvaging. And as I say, we were brought up very modestly, and it was a 5-room house, and believe me, 1 bathroom. We all used the tub to wash our hands, wash the clothes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And my mother did her thing, and we took our baths in there. And the neighbor made gin in hers during the war years. See, that was the era of deprivation. But we loved it. We didn't know any different. Yeah. We loved it. And then when they got through with the bathtub, then they put it in the ground vertically, put the Madonna in it, and made a shrine of it. So we didn't waste anything. Those were years of joy to us. We didn't know any different. Naturally, it proved to be a very frugal time in our lives, and people carried it through, all my contemporaries, including myself. So those were the years. And then came graduation, or almost. And what am I going to do with my life? The thing that impressed me most is that we can best bequeath roots and wings to our children. Mm-hmm. Now, I had great roots. My father and mother were very loving people, very concerned, and very caring. But now it was emancipation time to spread those wings a little bit, and I didn't know exactly what I was to do. But my friends at school talked about we were either going to be drafted or we were going to enlist. Now I had 3 good friends, and we were going to enlist. We were going to enlist in the Navy because we thought the life might be a little easier on a ship. And,
oh yeah.
And the food much better, we thought. In any case, we did enlist, and we waited and waited and waited. I would call up. We had the 1 phone in the high school, and that phone was used by the 3 of us during our lunch hour to call up home to find out whether we received our orders. No, we didn't. Now, one night we were out frolicking, the 3 of us, and we decided that it's been 4 or 5 weeks and we haven't heard. So one suggested we go to the post office.
Was that the recruiting station?
The post office, mailing, right to the mailing. And we asked him, he said, well, I don't usually do this, but all we want to know is whether we got our orders. And what you know, we had our orders. So now we're going to parade and fun. We were at a party to start with, and we went over to what was they sold root beer on West Housatonic Street. And between a root beer and hot dogs and the talking and frolicking, we had a grand time, but we didn't get home very early. It was 12 o'clock midnight. Getting home, my mother, for whatever reason that night, she always stayed up until I came home anyway, but she walked over to my bed and she said, you all right? And she carried on a conversation. Did you hear anything? I said, yes. We got our orders. And I got up off the bed and took my orders out of my pocket and gave them to her. And she asked a dozen questions. When are you going to go? Where do you go? You're going to be a good person. And all of the things she inquired about. And then I could see her choke up in tears. And her last and only child was going to leave the nest. And so I assured her that everything was going to be fine, and I joked a little bit. And she said, you're going to write home every day? Write home I will. And those letters have been preserved, incidentally, and I have them. They came to me a couple of weeks ago when my sister, my daughter got them from my sister's home and gave them to me, and that refreshed a lot of recollections. I wrote, always ended up with God bless you. God bless you. So I wrote home every day while I was in the Navy. And
excuse me, when did you go in the Navy?
That was in 1945.
And where'd you report?
I reported to first to Springfield, and then we went on to Sampson. That's where we did our New York State. I have not been there since I was there for boot camp, but it was my recollection, it was bucolic, and that beautiful scenery that they had at Sampson, and the little red barns in the distance, and then the lake, and then they had a train that went by that you could hear at night, and during the day also. So that it's a beautiful spot. But our introduction was not so beautiful.
Okay, that's the part, what with boot, how did that change your outlook on life?
Well, let me just say this, that, to be emancipated, to spread your wings, and to go from a very secure environment to an Army or Navy disciplined area. This one was a little different in that our chief was one who was overly bearing, in that he did things that I don't think you'd get from many people. For one thing, everybody was a jughead that he talked to. I luckily avoided, I don't know how, but avoided any of this. But the people around me I felt very sorry for, because there were more people going to sick bay. He would have them standing in line. If you didn't do anything if you did something he didn't like, he'd have the person behind you kick you, because he didn't want to do it. That wasn't how he would do it. And even people in the officer realm knew about this, and they would talk to you and encourage you, because he was a little much. And I remember him calling the person out, and he would question a lot of people and say, what did you do and join the Navy? You're too old. Too old? Yes, because he was older than the chief. He said, well, I'll tell you, my 3 brothers have served in the armed forces, and I just wanted to join them, and that was it. But I mean, he would ask questions. There was 1/3 of this outfit, and out of 130, that were I would say, over the age of myself. And they were older people, and they were married, most of those people. So they, for whatever reason, joined the Navy, too. But ultimately, he was relieved of his duties, and he went to Washington for a court-martial because he had taken the lieutenant's car on a day that he was to be have duty, watch duty, and he ended up smashing it up. But it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary, the treatment. But this is something that we have to, I was naive. It's something you have to accommodate and know about when you get into area of military or anything else where discipline is part of the training.
Did he ever come down on you as such?
No, he didn't. I don't know how.
How did you get around him?
I don't know how I avoided it, because I'll tell you, everybody else, and when I saw those poor people going to the chaplain and going to sick bay, but you know, the chief that took his place was as lovely as a person you'd ever want to meet. His first speech was this: look, it was a Newt Rockne sort of thing.
Oh.
You know, we're in this together. We're going to work on it together. We're going to proceed, and we're going to do something together because we're all in. And it was such a togetherness speech that I'll never forget it. He was a good man, and I remember his name was Mariner, and he really impressed the people. We didn't have him very long. Now then, we finished our boot camp, and I went by train, southern route through America to Texas, through Texas, and then to California. Now, what do I remember? Not very much. We stopped and talked and got off the train a little bit. But when we got to California, I do remember 3 days of hell.
Oh.
Yes, I do. They told us on that ship, it was so royally and so bad, the ship was wavering from side to side, that everybody was throwing up.
Oh. On luncheon, yeah.
Yeah, and they told us that if we would stay on our backs, they might avoid that. But if we were sick, what side of the ship to go on so it wouldn't blow back.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that was the ship that we were on. I was on for a month, and that meant that I had to sleep with 5 other people in a row, because what did you have, 2 feet in between each bed? Finally, I found the answer to that because it was unbearable. You could put your hammock on board. If you did it, you could string your hammock. You had to take it off before taps in the morning, and because they we're cleaning the ship.
Up the area.
They're cleaning up, and you would all right. So that's how I spent that month, going up there and sleeping there. Now, what did I feel as an individual? I felt very lonely. I felt very lonely. I told you
that mass of people?
Oh, listen, you know, you can have thousands of people, the physiognomy go by you and be the loneliest person in the world. You don't know them. You can't talk to them. These are people faces that are going. It's like Times Square. Mm-hmm. You can sit there all day and be lonely.
Yeah.
Well, I was very lonely on that ship, and it was the first time I had been away. I don't think I'd gone to West Pittsfield, and here I am going 10,000 miles away from my home and everything I was familiar with and everything I loved, and it was my security blanket at home. You know, when I left the shadow of the Pittsfield High School and the security blanket of my home, and left for such a long trip, that first time. And but I knew I had to do it. I knew I had to be emancipated. Yeah. I knew I had to start spreading those wings. And
now, for the record, continuity, if you will, you were talking about going west by train, and then you got us aboard ship. Where were you when you?
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
San Francisco, yes.
Had any training there at all? Did you just off the train onto the boat?
Just onto the boat. Yeah, and coming back was different. But I just went on that boat. We went on that boat. We went to Hawaii. We went to Guam. We were in Hawaii for a little bit, but we only got off one day, and then we went to Guam, and then to the island of Peleliu, and I had written a poem. That was the first one. And I was on this ship, and the constellation of stars was the only thing that was familiar to me. As I said, no faces I could communicate with. And I did write a poem that my mother later framed, and I did bring it today just in case you should ask me to do it.
Okay, I'll ask you.
Well, I have it here. I took it down.
Just happen to have it with you. Okay.
I just happen to have it with me.
With emotion now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not going to read it all because it's oh, Lord, why is it when I gaze up to the stars at night, they seem to shine a different light? From the rail of the ship I look aloft to see what they to me will wroth. They used to bring me to far-off lands, from Poland to the Arabian sands, but now to a different place I roam. It is no other than my home. And I went on to say, through the waves the ship onward plunges, night closing in like the darkest of dungeons. The wind blowing across the sea brings back memories from the stars to me. And I go on to tell about the stories that Dad used to tell, the one of the spooks that would make us yell, my attending of church on Christmas Day, observing the faces of the people so gay. The Sundays that Mom would spend in the kitchen, cooking the spaghetti, naturally, and roasting the chicken. The holy and sacred Easter morn at our parlor with Easter lilies adorned. The beautiful nights in the middle of June that she and I sat admiring the moon. These simple memories may seem unreal, but they are to me what the stars reveal. And then time to repose, the taps have blown. O Lord, till another night I remain alone. Now that was written by an 18-year-old.
Okay.
Lonely, homesick.
Yeah. But at least you had a vehicle, if you will, of expressing yourself.
Yes, well, yes. I always felt that poetry was after that a great vehicle. I didn't continue that until I retired writing.
Okay.
But
you sow the seeds, and stuff takes time to go along.
Yeah, and then we finally ended up on an island called Peleliu. It was part of the Caroline Islands, and that was a beautiful, beautiful paradise. It was all white coral with the ridges, and they had palm trees. I remember those coconut palm trees. They had taken the women off the island, and when we were there now, it was after the war. You understand?
Okay.
It was after the war.
They had, quote, dropped the bomb.
And I'll tell you a little bit, about that. It was very interesting, because this Peleliu was a very interesting island. And I say the ocean, and I had two friends there. One was a Mormon, and the other, I called him Hoppy, from South Carolina, and we went fishing every day. Hoppy was a fisherman, and we would go out there every day to fish. Now, what did I do there? I got into an office position, and they made me legal yeoman. So I had to sit down at every court-martial and take notes. Stayed up till 2 o'clock to make sure I got my reports in. Learned how to type a little bit more proficiently, and did that for the time I was there. And my chief in that office was Kalinka, a nice guy. His favorite words are you finished? Even after 2 minutes of starting, are you finished? And this island of Peleliu is a 2x6 island, very small, but it's probably the most unique that there is, because they had 500 different caves, and connected. It was the most intricate maze of construction you could find anywhere. And the interconnection of why did they do this? The Japanese believed that their defense on the beaches was not productive or not good. They had to build in the mountains, and they did that for protection. And it was a labyrinth way. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that they fought this battle in September of 1944. Now, we were there almost a year later. And let me tell you, you could see the crosses on top of that hill. They had thought that they were going to attack it. The Americans did. MacArthur wanted to. Nimitz was a little doubt. They were doubtful. It proven afterwards they didn't have to. They were going to attack, and then MacArthur's view and others was that to protect they were going to go into the Philippines, and figured that this was the first step. It was known as Bloody Nose Ridge, and it was one of the worst battles of the Pacific. They thought they'd have this island in 3 days, and it took 2.5 months with 10,500 deaths. Now, there was still, when we went there, you'd go into the caves, there was still a stench. And we were told not to lift up things because there were still mines around. And I remember going on duty in a Jeep strap a gun on me and go on there alone, and I'd hear shots, bing, bing, bing. What happened was that the Japanese, 30 of them, still remained in those caves.
And they were living there.
They were
after
living
the war,
there.
though, yeah.
They would not come out. They would not come out during the day. And those were the shots you heard. Everybody suspected. But after, almost a year after I left that island, 30 of them came down and surrendered.
They finally
30
gave
Japanese, where they finally gave up. Now, there was one female, I guess, and the rest male, but they were, maybe it was because they didn't want to surrender, it was against, or they didn't know the war was over, or whatever it was. They stayed in that. And one person brought down a skeleton from one of the caves and said, "You can't take that home." He said, "Well, my father took a German one home, so yeah." So I mean, it was after the fact, but there were still existing semblances of what had gone on in that, and you can imagine, as I say, the caves that were there that you could see and go in the cemetery. So it was a bloody battle. It was a bloody battle.
Damn right it was.
It was a bloody battle, and I again, when we were finally told we were going to leave, and on my way home, they stopped in California and put me at Alameda Air Base. But the fact of the matter is, the time I was there and doing those court martials and other office, why I was selected, I don't know. But in any case, because I had no training at all. I just got out of high school, and there was no training that I had received. Not typing, I learned how to type by doing, actually, there. And well, I use a system, but people come across your path, and it's too bad we can't hold on, because the memories are so great. I met some of the finest people. My commanding officer, who was the prosecutor, and one of the cases was for getting the alcohol from the that came in for planes and everything else, and diluting it, or doing what they did to it so that they could drink it. That was one of the court martials.
Yeah, jungle juice, yeah.
Did you ever hear that before?
Oh, yeah.
That was the first time. And
strain it through bread, it takes some of the bite out.
Okay, and then of course there was a murder on there, and there were other trials. But when he left, I got a note from him, which I wished I had kept, thanking me for my work and leaving me his typewriter.
Oh.
Now that typewriter I used all the way through, it was a Smith Corona, and I used it all the way through college. The typewriter, he gave me that. And as I say, some of the nice people, like I'm telling you about my two friends, and we used to be very careful because there were a lot of shark out there. We were near the dump to where they tossed all the garbage, and the sharks would come in.
Yeah.
At one point, I did have one on my line, but certainly I didn't wrestle with them. I cut the line. But it was a good experience for me. It was away from home. I spent my first Christmas there, first Thanksgiving, away from home. And the things that you really introspectively you take up and you say, now what am I going to do with my life? Now I've gotten this far, what is Rudy Sacco going to do? Yeah. What am I going to do? Now, one thing I found out on that island is that your rank made a difference. You had better quarters, you had Coke when we had water. So what is it what made the difference? Education.
Yeah. Education.
So back here, I figured I better look into it. Now, no one in my house had been educated. No one went to, beyond high school. No one went to college. Where was I to start? How was I to find my way into an institution of learning? Well, I did, when we got to Alameda Air Base, I worked in that office for a while, and then we flew home, and too late to get into college. And I said, well, golly, I don't know. Maybe I'll try prep schools. And there were a few prep schools in our area. And one was Cranwell. It was a Jesuit-run prep school.
Yeah, right up in Lenox.
And I had gone there not knowing even how to get in, and I looked around and didn't see anyone, and then I heard there was a door open, formerly Berkman's Hall, and I went down the cellar, and there was a man on a ladder fixing something, and I said, sir, I said, could you tell me where I can see a priest or talk to a priest? And he got down from the ladder, brushed his hands, shook my hand, and he said, I'm Father Morris. What can I do for you?
You're talking to him.
I'm talking to him. So I asked him about going to school there, and he took me to the office, and I did get in there, and I spent the year at Cranwell.
Now, was that under the GI Bill, or was this
no,
extracurricular?
Very interesting. I wanted to use the GI Bill because I hadn't been in the service that long.
Oh.
So I said, I don't have money. But they had me run the telephone operator's position.
Oh.
Now those were with wires, you know, if you called,
plug here,
plug
there,
in, and I did that for the year.
That was your tuition?
That was my tuition, and I had a room, if you're ever going by Cranwell and you look up to the highest room on the left at the main building, that was my room. Now not only did I work there, but I formed such a relationship that I was in charge of their waterfront for 4 years. I was a lifeguard, waterfront instructor there. So
we're down at Stockbridge Lake?
That was down Laurel Lake.
Laurel Lake.
Beyond that, okay. And they had a piece of property there, and I worked there. And then when I went to go to college, I had been accepted at one BU, with 1 year there, and Father Maxwell, who was the dean there, and the rector said, well, you go to Boston College. And
oh, versus BU?
I did go to Boston College for 4 years. And that was all because of connections and concern. And I had a marvelous time there and had a great deal of respect for those who were running it educationally. And they did a great job and certainly helped me form my future plans. And I worked there, as I say, for the 4 years that I was in college. Good. In the summertime. So I had great, and I did go to Boston College. And then after that, of course, there was a question of where am I going to go now? What am I going to do? I leaned toward law school, and this is what I did. And I think the rest of the story is pretty obvious. I went to law school and came back to Pittsfield because there was no thoughts of going anywhere else. And in the meantime, I met a young lady who was going to Regis College in Weston. And she and I had gone out, and there was no question in my mind that that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
She was there.
She was there. And now 10 children after, and 55 years after, we're still together. And I went to law school and graduated, and then went in, and then, I'm sorry, you have a question?
No.
No. And then after that, I became active in organizations here in Pittsfield. We moved back to Pittsfield, and I loved it here. That was my hometown. This is where I was brought up, and there was never any question in my mind where I was going to go live. Good. Unlike what you see today when you read the obituaries, all over, because they couldn't find the jobs. And then Pittsfield was very prosperous and very good, and it was my home. So anyway, I came back here, moved here, lived at one of my father's homes for a while, and then we moved to William Street at one point in a 13-room house. We had to with the children, and now my goal was to make sure that all of them were educated. I was almost pushing to the degree that they all knew that it had to be. They had to be educated. And we had our trials and tribulations and the loss of 2 children, and the scars still remain. And one was in a high school, and he was president of his class, and he had received the DAR award, and lovely, lovely person. Died of an aneurysm around Christmas time. And the other had a degree, a master's degree in urban development, and she went to Alaska to live, build a house, was building a house there, and she and her husband had a plane, private plane, and they went down the private plane. So we have 8 others that are scattered. One is in England, who is working for the government. And then we have 4 lawyers in the family.
Wow,
and
competition.
Yeah, 1 surgeon at Mass General, and an entrepreneur, and one who works for the state. So that this is my lifetime. This is my flapping my wings. And now I'm of an age where I just turned to be an octogenarian. Now that doesn't mean I don't eat meat, octogenarian, you'll understand that.
Or not an oxymoron, okay.
No. And I find that I'm not buying green bananas or doing anything risky at my age. And
no continued stories?
No continued, well, I read short stories, and as a result of you, I want you to know I started writing. And I've gotten
Don't blame it on me, Daddy.
I mean, when you wanted me to do this, and you said it's going to go in the archive, and I'm a very interested individual in history. I love history. I majored in it. Every year I take a 3-day sabbatical, and I go to a historical place with 3 other men, and we've covered many of the battlegrounds. We've covered the battlegrounds, and we covered the homes. Now, from Harry Truman's house in Missouri to the battlegrounds from Maine to down to Virginia and beyond. And last year we went to Provincetown, where the Queen of England came in, and also not Provincetown, I'm sorry, Virginia.
Williamstown. No, Williamsburg.
Williamsburg, in that area, and also the president went down. But we went there. And it's lovely to go into homes of the presidents. I've been in all their homes, I mean, in the local area, Virginia and on, because it's the epitome of where they walked, where they looked out that window, where they decided things, and it just is a great feeling. Okay. So I enjoy it.
Let me ask you, back up a little bit. How long have you been practicing law? And what was your series?
Well, I was practicing law. I was a judge for 25 years.
I know that, yeah.
Yeah, and before that, I was a Department of Public Utility Commissioner for 3. Well, that was when they monopolized the various utilities, and we had, if they wanted the rate increase, they would have to come before our commission. AT&T, and Western Mass, and all of the others that had, I say they were the only utility. It was sort of monopolistic. Yeah. And I don't say it was bad either, but if they won the rate increase, they had to go before the commission. Before that, for 10 years, I was an assistant attorney general under Elliot Richards, under first Ed Brooke, and he still contacts me. He was former senator. I heard from him last week. A very, very close friend. Ed Brooke, Volpe, Governor Volpe, you remember him? Okay. Sargent appointed me as a judge. And Elliot Richardson, who was also my boss in the Attorney General's office, and he received more governmental appointments than anybody I know, because he was the England ambassador, he was Secretary of State, he was Attorney General on a national level. Very brilliant person, very brilliant person. So I worked with all of these people, and then I became a judge, and for 25 years I sat in there. And unlike, I was in probate and family court, trial division, which meant that my job took me to relationships more than illegalities in the district court. As I tell my district court friends, they saw bad people at their very best. I saw good people at their very worst.
Balance.
And and the other thing we had is adoptions, and I loved that, bringing people into your life rather than separating. And that became, then I was on the administrative board of our court. There were 3 judges, and we met monthly in Boston to look over the overview of the, that court handled more cases than any court in the Commonwealth. As I say, there's a lot of people, with 52% of the people who are not together, and relationships, and we had adoptions, and we also had heated cases in the probate wills contest.
They could get nasty sometimes.
They could go there, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a full and active existence, and I appreciated and liked what I did, but now in the twilight of my life, I can't say I just like retirement. I think this is a marvelous.
Oh, you got to grow into it, though.
Well, I'm not controlled by the hands of the clock anymore.
Yeah.
And my wife and I are able to do things. We're able to go places now that we couldn't. I travel a lot. Go to Europe maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh.
Oh,
Right.
I'm crazy, you know, in
No.
moving. But I like the idea of being retired, and it gives me time. It gives us time to do what we want. We moved from a 13-room house, and now we're down to Salisbury, which is a turnkey living, which I love.
Hey. You don't have to bother with the lawnmower anymore, then.
I don't have to, listen, all I do is turn the key. I don't have to plow, I don't have to shovel, I don't have to do the lawn.
Do you miss it?
Not at all. Not at all. You know, we got to know, this is the problem, I think, with good friends, and I've had a lot of them, and I'll tell you, and I really miss them, because I felt that I walked the sands of life with many good people whose footprints have been washed away by the sea of eternity.
Yeah.
They're not with us.
I know. That happens.
I mean, I could mention Judge Tamburello, whom I used to see constantly, Judge Quirko every weekend, and he was a Supreme Court judge here. Judge Andy Nucifero, who was a great friend, and we traveled together. And all of the other people that we were together with are no longer around. So that's a sadness.
Let me ask a couple of silly questions, I think, but I'll say experience and training you had, well, quote, you made 3rd class, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Did that in any way influence, in retrospect, your introduction into and then the pursuit of law?
It did. It did. That and a few others. I had met a lawyer, Hafey, who used to come to the house to eat occasionally because my father was in a little accident, and I was rather impressed by him. And when I made my confirmation, the nun said, "Now you ask for whatever you want to be." And why I asked to be a lawyer, I don't know.
Well, you got to go someplace.
And I did. And it was on my mind all this time that, you know, then I would pray and say, "Oh, look at that." But I never thought I would reach it. I never thought that I did, because I had no basis, no support.
But, well, it's probably just Providence.
It was just, you know, and I'm not a Clarence. I was never a Clarence Darrow or any of the greats. But I'll tell you, you know, I appreciated the business, and I appreciated the people I met through it. So
how would you catalog or classify your time in the service with respect to, was it positive or negative?
Oh, it was very positive. It was very positive. I'll tell you, you know, we operate on a very narrow path when you're brought up in a neighborhood and you don't see beyond that neighborhood, and you know that this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be finding a job, you're going to be earning a living, and that will be your life. If I hadn't been exposed to something greater by going away and meeting other people and doing other things and knowing what the difference was in education and non-education, I think that was a great influence on my life.
Good.
That period I was there. And it was an introspection. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? Where am I going to go? And I think that that alone was a great influence on my life. Well, and I'm so glad I went in.
Now, it being, as you said, an octogenarian, what kind of advice, if that's a good way to put it, would you offer or suggest to some of the guys and gals that are coming along now and trying to find their way?
I'll tell you, you know, it's a different era. You got to know that, for one thing, I would have everybody know how great our country is. Historically, what has happened in here, how much blood was shed to make it a democracy when I listened to all of the speeches on TV that we're getting now. And I think to know that their life is in their hands, is in their hands. Now we live in a country that you can do what you want to do with your life. I mean, that's providing you have the abilities. I mean, we know that. If you don't, you don't. It's like a Jesuit priest used to tell us, you put your foot on the accelerator. If the accelerator goes, push it to the bottom. In other words, use your talents.
Give it. Yeah.
Given talents. So that I would tell them to do that, and I did that. And my son that we lost 2 days before, he said, Dad, he said, you know, I think I'll go in the Army. I said, Randy, why? He said, well, you can't afford to send all of us to college. I mean, this is the concern he had. He knew that that's what I wanted to do with them, because I thought that that might be one way. I'm not saying it's for everybody. But certainly if you have the talent, we know the job market is greater. The income is going to be greater. Your security is going to be greater. If you have something, some talent.
Yeah. Plus, you can make, if you will, you can make your mark on the world to prove that you appreciated what was given you and you could use it properly.
Absolutely. And you know, this is okay. But as I say, I had none of this. I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to go into service, and they were loving and caring. But I was fortunate enough to maybe been in the Navy, maybe to reflect. Maybe to, I was very religious in that period of time. I should have kept that up, you know, still. But I mean, I do believe in all of the things that you combine to do with your life is in your hands. It's in your hands. So what would I tell them to do? For one thing, the most important title in the world is good person, good. Other than that, then you can do what you want after that. And Kay and I are very fortunate. Our children are good people.
Good.
They're close and good.
Yeah. Well, they probably reflect, if you will, not giving you a handout, but the training and the love that you gave them.
Yeah, but mostly the wife, my wife.
Well, you have to have them. No. But I guess you call it, that's the good part of it.
Yeah.
But I have had, interjecting a bit here, some very interesting guys, each one a little different, who have served in some branch or what have you. And I think the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, leading it now, they probably, if you will, at our age, right, we wouldn't go fight another war, but the opportunities that came as a result of having participated, I think, are immeasurable.
I would have been at college, the GI Bill.
Huh? Without
me,
you
know, GI Bill.
I'd be driving a truck somewhere.
That's right, and there was no middle class before that.
No.
And this is why we have to stress our appreciation of history and what our parents went through. My father came over at 18, and that was, if anything, would be demoralizing to me, is have to go through what he went through. From Ellis Island, they're looking for streets of gold. They found maybe streets of opportunity, but the way they lived, I lived in luxury when I compare. I lived in luxury. And I mean, you know, raising chickens in the cellar, getting the eggs, selling them, doing all the things, working. The emblem of the Italians and the Irish in 1850, but the Italians was a pick and shovel and a trowel. That was their imaginary. And then they had 4 F's on this flag: one for faith, one for friends, one for family, and one for food.
The food is the important one.
That was the last one. But no, this is goes without saying. What would I do? Each generation has its own, but I think very sincerely that I'm satisfied. I never thought I'd be living this long because my siblings, I'm the only sibling living, and I have some viability, and my children are doing well. They don't need care packages. And we went from 13, I own Bucksteep in the town of Washington.
Oh.
375 acres, and I can tell everybody here if they want to buy it,
I'll be your agent.
And we moved from there to Salisbury now, and but we had a 13-room house. So and the children were brought up there. We had a Camp Carew. We had a day camp up there for 25 years, and before the resort, and we operated from Blantyre for 4 years. And Mr. Mendes, another good association. Mr. Mendes called me one day up there, and he said, "I want to do something for you. I want to sell you Blantyre." "Yes, Mr. Mendes." "I'm going to give you a good price." "Yes." $115,000. I couldn't afford $115,000.
The 15, maybe.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine $115,000? It's beautiful, but it's one of the best inns in the country, I think.
Wow.
But you know, it's been a pleasant life, and it's been pleasant people I've associated with.
Well, it's corny, but I'm finally getting to understand what my grandkids used to say. What goes around comes around.
Yeah.
You may not recognize what's going on right now, but somewhere down the line, it'll be recognized, and you will or will not suffer or gain from it. Okay.
You know, this is one reason why when you called me, and I said this is nice, and I'm appreciative to all the staff here and to you, because Abigail Adams had not this opportunity, nor did Martha Washington, to give us a history. Not that this is going to go beyond this, but for my children and my grandchildren. One of the things that I'm a little depressed about, I don't know enough about my grandfathers. I don't know enough about that. I wrote a speech once and delivered it for Ed Brooke, Senator Brooke in Irving, and the title was, "We're one generation away from extinction."
Oh.
Who knows? Your grandchildren come up, I don't know where Grandpa lived. I don't. So I want to do that. I want them to know, because I would love to have known, and I love history. And if we love history, McCullough said it was abominable that we don't know enough history. Well, how about your personal history?
Yeah. Well, that's we're going way off the loon here, but that's what got me into going. Like you, the grandkids said, "Grandpa, what did you do in the war?"
Yeah.
You know, and as I said once in a promo, I had to stop and think, what war? Because over the last 60 or so years, there have been 4 or 5 major wars, and the question is, how much do I want to tell you, and how much do I feel I will never tell anybody?
I know it.
But that's what this whole program is all about.
And you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job.
I admire your good taste, but we all thank you. But we're going a little bit of field. But
well, you know,
it's life. Pure and
it's life. And I'll tell you, if it wasn't for the service and it wasn't for your type, you're working in 2 things. You're working in the service and what effect that has on individuals, and you're working on the history. You know, there was a poll by Life magazine asking the famous people of the world what is their most important gift they ever received.
They never asked me.
The gift of life.
Oh.
You're the beneficiary of the gift of life. You're the legacy. So, I mean, we give this gift of life, and we want them to know in return, who is it? Who is it? My great-grandfather, who is it? My father loved his family. You know, he never did take that trip to Italy back again. He was afraid. He couldn't read or write. It's a 3rd grade education. Prophetic, though. I got to tell you that when he patted me on the back when I was 5 years old, and he said, "Rudolph, someday you're going to go up a high." Yeah. Well, I did. I went up to Bucksteep, 2,000 feet above sea level. And then he said, "Maybe Washington."
Yeah, Washington. Well,
and then the other thing is, of course, I don't have the White House up there, but I'm surrounded by bushes. I want you to know that. Ooh. Oh, they get worse.
Oh, they don't get much worse, but this isn't political. This is social.
Well, this is all right. Well, this is a fact. The bushes, the trees.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm going to have to say thank you for sharing with us, but more important, this little repartee we had. If we can get people, after seeing and hearing this kind of program, to come and share with us, we in turn will start filling in the blocks of history. And the more we can do, the better it's going to be for everybody, so that their grandkids won't have to say, "Well, what did you do and why did you do it?" Because it'll be there. This will be recorded, this will be reflected, and it'll be there for the rest of the world to know what you did and so on.
And I appreciate this, and I thank you very much for this.
Our pleasure.
History.
as the man said.
And
good
and if
warm
my
hands.
children don't treat me right, I'm going to send them a copy. And
Okay, well, we'll have a couple made up for you. All right?
okay. Thank
Well, this is a wrap-up, folks. We played with the clock a little bit because we a little bit astray, but the basic is, as you've seen right now, for anybody. Now, this may sound strange, but I'm particularly anxious to get some of the guys from the Korean War era. I read about them having been a veteran, was a veteran, but I haven't had any or many of you come forward. This is our chance to share with the world what we have done. You don't have to be a hero, if you will, you know, lots of medals and that, but whatever your job was and that you did, that's what we'd like to find and share. So please, if you can and if you will, give us a call. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.